We're about to be.
Love it.
Cool.
Good
everybody.
afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, in fact, everyone, from wherever you may be joining us. Welcome to this live event presented by Strivin, the 2023 wrap-up, and also a few little insights and tips and tricks for 2024. We have a very high-quality panel of prognosticators to help you out with that. However, before we kick off the formal part of the day, I would just like to take this opportunity, certainly for all of those who are joining from Australia, to pay acknowledgement and recognise the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet today. In my case, that is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And to all of the people and nations from wherever you may be, we pay homage and respect to their elders past and present. All right. So, as I said, we have a wonderful panel today, people of far more intelligence and importance than myself, so I will get to introducing them straight away. However, just so that you know why I'm here, my name is Michael Delaney. I am the Head of People and Culture for Prezi, but I'm also one of the founding members of Strivin. I will be here to take your questions, to feed things back into the panel, and generally keep things running. But our panellists are really wonderful people, and we're very grateful that they've given this time. So we have the amazing Lucy Wilson, Chief People and Culture Officer for Gumtree. We have Derek McCartney, the founder and CEO of Preacta, and a man of international renown who definitely has his pulse on what is going on in TA, P&C and HR, the incomparable Hung Lee. And I welcome my MC and host to the stage, Hung. But just before he starts, for everybody else, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments on LinkedIn, and we will feed them through to the panel so that they get a chance to respond. And if you don't mind, oh, hang on, and here's our fourth panelist. Excellent, perfect timing. Ellie Miller, who is the Chief People Officer for Leonardo AI. Excellent work, because we were just about to hand over. So for those joining us, please put in where you are joining us from and what has been your key challenge for 2023, and I'll feed back to the panelists. And if you have any questions, let me know. But with no further ado, I pass over to the incomparable Hung Lee to take it away. Welcome, sir.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How's the day been so far? Wonderful to be joining with you guys. Always a pleasure to be speaking with the wonderful recruiter community down under. So great to see everybody. Let's I see sort of no reason why we shouldn't just kick off the conversation. What are we now? 9th, 10th of November now. We've had the 2003 is almost behind us. I think if we blink our eyes and wake up, sort of, it'd be one of those where suddenly we're at Christmas and oh my goodness, the year has gone by. And I just wondered whether it would be an interesting start for us to start sort of go around the panelists and just ask, did 2023 hit your expectations? Yes, no. What did you imagine to be the case at this time last year, and did those things occur for you? So why don't we just ask that question first and just get a flavor as to how we think this year has gone for us. Ellie, as you came last, similar to me, just rocking up just in a just-in-time manner, it kind of makes sense that you go first. So why don't you tell us how sort of did 2003 meet your expectation? How has it matched compared to what you thought would happen?
Yeah, and sorry I was late, everyone. I was in the LinkedIn Live waiting room. I was not in the right place. It's entirely my fault. 2023 very much lived up to my expectations. So on a personal note, I had a goal to relocate to Australia. And I also had a goal to make sure in doing so that I found a really great company to work for. So from a personal perspective, it's been a really big year for me. And from a people team perspective, it's meant that I really wanted to finish up my previous role, which was at Depop, in a really good place, and put myself in a really good place to start a new position as well. So it's been a lot of reflecting on like what were some of the achievements I made along the way, but also what could I do differently starting a new job, which is perfect to set this conversation up for today, right?
Okay, so that's the personal side. Look, congratulations and all of that, by the way, Ellie. How did it sort of match to what you thought would happen, as a market, as a business, and all that kind of stuff?
I think for me, it's been really interesting coming from the UK market, but also working a lot with the US market because of Depop being owned by Etsy. Starting to look in the HR market in Australia, it was really, really interesting coming off the back of what was a lot of tech redundancies at the start of the year. So around the time that I was really starting to speak to people in the market, they were saying, look, it's a really tough time in Australia right now. And there's some really fantastic Australian talent on the market because of what's going on in the industry. And so what that's really meant is I can tell there's an immense amount of talented people, and we've gone from a very candidate-driven market to a very employer-driven market. And it's really interesting to think about the power dynamic that shifts there. And it's great to be a candidate again, because you start to really understand what your employees are going through and how they feel being in the world of work right now, which is it's tough, and people might want to make moves, but equally there's lots of great talent on the market. And for employers, you have access to great talent, but equally, you know, you need to nurture the talent that you already have, because it's been really interesting entering this market and seeing that there's a timing difference in what's going on, but similar challenges.
Yeah, and that sense of toughness, I think that seems to be that resonates, doesn't it, folks? 2003 hasn't been easy. It feels it's been a very chewy type of 12 months, I think, for a lot of folks in our industry. So it's the first thing to think about. Before we dive into it, let's ask Derek the same question. If you can cast your mind back 12 months, Derek, did 2003 meet your expectations? If so, what happened, and if not, why would you say?
Yeah, it's a good question. I remember this time last year actually pretty vividly, and we were already seeing in European and US markets the work start and the program start to be pulled back, and obviously a lot of redundancies and right sizing or sort of cutting of people in those markets. And Australia, in many respects, have been insulated for most of 22, and it was only really towards the end of 22 where we started to see a real impact in terms of certainly in the tech market, real pullback in hiring. And I remember sitting in October, November 22, and thinking Australia's a very isolated, insulated market. Really in GFC we really bounced back pretty quickly. COVID, we snapped back incredibly quickly. So maybe from my end, there's probably some level of belief or hope that the market would be probably pulling back again, and then coming back to some sense of stability around April, May. And then I remember getting to April and it was just like, it's just getting worse. And then to June it was getting worse, and I think we started to then really take a much longer horizon in terms of our planning. But I think for us the key thing, and certainly for a lot of our partners through that period, has been needing to be adaptive, needing to be responsive, needing to be reforecasting again, and ultimately just making sure that we had all scenarios, and working with our customers to have all scenarios planned out to see how we could be ready to respond if once we got some sense of stability. So yeah, I think 2023 is definitely not played out as I thought it would play out in back into 22, but I think once we got to the end of Q1 in 23, we started to think it's going to be a pretty tough year, certainly in the Australian market. And I think it's only really now that we're starting to see some sense of stability and green shoots coming back.
Yeah, really good point, Derek. That sense of optimism. I think recruiters are naturally optimistic, aren't we? It's part of the DNA of the community, but also I think necessary, right? Because we look forward, we recruit people for future. It's a positive job, and we can carry that as a very strong. I think it's a very powerful characteristic of us as professionals. But it was one of those where we had to maybe recorrect and, as you say, extend horizons when it was apparent there wasn't going to be some sort of elastic bounce back that we thought it would be. So I definitely got that sense as well, Derek. Lucy, let's switch to you with the same question. 2023, just expectations, and how did it marry up to what you thought would happen? What are your thoughts on that?
You know what, Hung? I feel like expectations are a really dangerous thing that none of us should have any of, especially coming out of that COVID period, right? I mean, are we out of it? I don't know. It seems like we've kind of gone a bit cyclical in terms of change, and everyone's now officially a change agent. So I would say expectations wise, I probably didn't have any. It's been a wild 2023 though. Like, I mean, personally transitioning out of a, self-founded business, consulting with lots of different clients, seeing lots of different incredible things, and all of their ups and downs. And then I think transitioning into a home among the gum tree, and that is a pun for anybody that's been around long enough. The way I have Burke's Backyard used to be a song, right, in Australia, and a home among the gum trees. I now work for Gumtree. It's been amazing. And we too have been through significant change over the past sort of 10 months since I started in my role there. So look, you add into all of that heavy world impacts at the moment, heavy heart for a lot of people watching on. It's just heavy. I'm not even going to go there today, but it's a lot. And I think that focus the last 12 months, particularly around how are we looking after people so that they're, not only, I guess, showing up, but showing up and kind of doing the best they can and feeling connected. So it's been a big focus of just reconnecting from, and, a very privileged position of being able to redefine our values as an organisation, how we want to roll, what we believe in, and, really driving towards that sort of mission together. So it's been a really, I would say, a bit more strategic and high level, which has been nice, but certainly less expectations, the better, and more focus on reconnecting and sort of meaningful connections has been pretty cool. So yeah, that's probably what I'd say.
No, I think that's it's a sober perspective, Lucy. And I think you're right. Maybe were we naive to come into 2023 with expectations, having seen what we've seen over the last 3-4 years or so, where pretty obviously we're not able to sensibly predict what the future would look like, particularly when there's these huge externalities that keep happening that do have a dampening effect over sentiment and activity that's often beyond sort of the immediate world of recruiting. So yeah, absolutely. And did we use the opportunity to kind of look at more strategic work when we didn't have the business's operations being as manic as it usually is? Remember, recruiting is so often having to do 24 hours worth of work in 26 hours. It's completely overworked our ability to ever look at some of the things that we say we prioritize or care about. Oftentimes, we don't have the time or capacity to look at it. Did we use the time well in 2023? Quick one on explanations. I mean, before we go on to how we talk about it internally, I think that's a really important segue we'll move on to in a second, Lucy. For the Aussie market in particular, what do you think were the key things that happened in 2023 that did create the year that we had? I mean, have you guys have any sort of theories or any hypotheses as to what that would be, whether it's sector specific or industry specific or even on a wider scale? Derek, you're nodding your head there, so let's go to you. Never give me a micro expression, man.
No, thanks, man. I don't think Australian market is very, has been very dissimilar to what you would have seen in the US. I think that the broader narrative to the market has been full employment rate. And, I guess really we've only had a lot of, I would say, significant challenge from a hiring or talent perspective, principally in tech or tech-related organizations, or those related directly to sort of, consumer discretionary spending, whether that's property or motor vehicles or the like. We've been living through an interest rate environment that continues to rise. Cost of doing business is way more expensive. We have a very small VC market in Australia, so funds dried up pretty quickly. And I think that we saw a lot of hiring pullback, pretty early on, and I think similar to what Lucy touched on there, I think a lot of organizations started to shift, certainly mid-year towards strategic thinking, looking at the operating models, looking at workforce planning, how can they right size, but also make sure that they're setting themselves up strategically for when the bounce does come. But I think that we've seen industries like oil and gas and energy, ancillary industries to tech, really take this opportunity to hire a lot of tech talent into those industries. And Australia having such a short talent market, I think it's setting us up for an interesting world of pain on the other side of this in 24, that's for sure.
That's an interesting sort of trend. So, I mean, we've seen that in the UK as well as in Europe as well, where we had a lot of tech talent move into to sort of industries where traditionally they weren't that interested in working in. You see a lot of people moving into manufacturing, moving into big retail, more mature businesses, whereas previously these folks would only be interested in, any country, any company that had a series something or other on their shop line.
And I think we've lost a lot of recruiting talent as well from tech, from engineering, from product that have now also gone outside of industry, whether that's talent or people capability. So I think it's just going to be a much more strained market now. We're creating for
We haven't lost them, Derek, because they're still recruiters. You are still a recruiter.
That's true.
It doesn't matter if you're in oil and gas. And what we need to do is possibly expand our horizons, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody, because I'm like hyper focused on the tech and the VC backed tech businesses, not from any design, but simply because they do make the most noise. And over the past maybe even 10, 15 years, they have been, if you like, the most attractive opportunities. That's where the pay were highest. That's where actually a lot of the recruitment innovation occurred, because they were hyper scaling. They were doing things that actually more mature businesses weren't, because which kind of company would ever want to hire 1,000 engineers in 6 months? This is that period where VCs would dump a huge amount of money in, and suddenly as recruiters you'd have to work something that hadn't occurred previously. Ellie, that's the Depop experience, isn't it? Has the world shifted back to, if you like, more normal businesses, would you say? I mean, are VC backed companies, the ones that are still around, as competitive or as compelling to the candidate base as more mature businesses that might be able to communicate things like stability and things like we're making real things? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good word. And I was about to say, I think people crave a bit more stability. We had crazy startup times, then we had COVID happen, lots of industries made redundancies, and then coming out of COVID, companies have been slowly recovering, and then tech has been hit particularly hard. And so it's not just about what's happening now, it's about the fatigue that people feel from the amount of change that's happened. I know that talent teams, especially, not even just people teams, but recruiters have been hit super hard just from those waves of what candidates are really struggling with too, which is that companies are needing to respond very quickly to things that are changing super, super fast. And so it means 1 minute you might think you've got 10 roles, and then the next minute you're trying to think about, do we need to be really bold here and do a hiring freeze, because would it be the responsible thing to do? And so I think candidates are craving a bit more stability. I think that they are opening their horizons to where more mature companies have more structure around what they're able to offer. They're able to offer more in the way of total comp. We're in a cost of living crisis, so gone are the days where people are willing to take a massive pay cut to take a hunch on a tech startup. And so that's really tough when you actually are a tech startup and your resources are limited and VCs are limited. And so the market conditions are super interesting now, where you might have thought you had your pick of the market, but actually people really need to think about what their employer value proposition is beyond being a tech company. And I'm seeing, it's been really nice to come into the Australian market and see some really innovative benefits that people are offering, seeing that lots of people are thinking about supporting working parents, parental leave, starting to think really deeply about the cohorts of people that are in their company and what they want. And that's actually probably borrowing quite a lot from more traditional industries who had already had quite a suite of benefits in those areas, I think. So yeah, I think we can be a bit more humble about what we have to learn from people outside of the tech market.
There is this trend, isn't there, where it seems like there's more candidates on the active market, just in terms of applicant flow. That seems to be gone up. There's lots of interesting research that suggests that even the highly skilled in-demand type candidates are being a little bit more happy to engage with recruiters, happy to have conversations with us. But actually the hiring rate has not sort of increased on the other side of it. So it tells us that people are happy to talk about opportunities, but they're less jumping into them because their risk aversion is much higher. And I think everyone is feeling a little bit more insecure than they have been in the past. Therefore, you're going to take the recruiter call, you're going to respond to the message perhaps, but are you going to commit all the way through and say a quick yes to a job opportunity when you might have something that's a bit steadier in your pocket?
And that's why I think that thinking about your employer value proposition, even if you are able to get that candidate that maybe was super hot on the market, like what are you going to do when the market picks up? And how are you actually going to retain that person that you were able to get, maybe you wouldn't have been able to get otherwise? And also diverse talent. I think I'd love to see some more data, but I have a hunch that if you're from an underrepresented community, perhaps you're less willing to take that risk. Maybe there's more concerns you might have around either belonging or just safety starting in a new company. And so for people wanting to hire diverse talent from underrepresented communities, I would have a hunch, and I'd love to validate that hunch with some data. I haven't been able to find any yet, that people from underrepresented communities are less likely to make a career move in an uncertain market. So if anyone has that data, please send it to me.
Please let us know in the comments, folks. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, that's actually a really interesting bit of a potential bit of research for somebody to do. Are people from underrepresented communities less likely to take a chance in market conditions that feel a little bit more difficult and high risk? So when everything was like, abundance mindset, and an opportunity might be coming around once every, if you wanted an opportunity, you could just snap your fingers and there it would be. Is it much more difficult for you to take that risk, particularly if you generally have a feeling that the market has always been, you've always had handicaps based on identity and what have you? So let us know in the comments if you have any experience of that, anecdotal or not. And indeed, if anybody has any research, that would be a great thing to share. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting point. I think when was peak DE&I? Can we even need to say that? Is that too high risk? But it certainly wasn't 2023, right? I mean, it was probably, I think, 2021 maybe, where suddenly we have the data on it, so it's not speculation. I think LinkedIn published there was an article around 2021 where LinkedIn published that this is the year of sort of chief diversity officers, where the role itself became one of the most popular kind of growing, one of the fastest growing roles on their platform. But I do believe Michael is correct that the growth certainly isn't there anymore, and it may well be that those jobs are being cut. I'm thinking purely here on the US side. I think in the US, that's probably where chief diversity officers emerged in a serious way. I don't think it ever came to Europe in the same fashion. Are you shaking your head, Derek? So I assume it didn't come to the
I didn't. Very, 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 very. It's limited in it, even in its penetration into Australia. And I think that just touching on that diversity point, Ellie, I think what the only trend really, I mean, we've had a lot of, probably if anything, some neurodiversity focus in 23. There's definitely probably more of a push towards First Nation and Indigenous diversity thinking in 2024. But again, it's going to be so immature from where it starts from, that whether or not we actually achieve the desired impact and it's given the space and the time to achieve what we hope to achieve, it's probably very unlikely.
Yeah. Have you guys got the sense that things like DE&I have been deprioritized, let's say, by C-level, even if it hasn't been explicitly instructed? But do you get the sense that it was a little bit, look, guys, we just got to try and do things, do what we can. We have to think about revenue. We have to think about profit. Lucy, you're shaking your head there. What are your thoughts? Your direct experience here?
Yeah, I don't think that we've stopped thinking about it. I mean, I'm not from an underrepresented community, so I'm very, very conscious of that when I say that. I'm certainly no savior, but I think in terms of what we're thinking about when we're casting a wider net and making sure we work harder to get a better talent spread and make sure that we're actually going to different places to access it, I think that's part of it. But I don't think we've stopped or it's kind of gone on the back burner. I think we've kind of, certainly where I've been playing, we need to take it next level. And we've been talking about, this isn't about going out to market and trying to find a particular type of individual. It's actually about shifting thinking around how we view that. And it should be the norm, should be equity, it should be inclusive. And some would argue if you're, running an inclusive organisation at its truest, well, you shouldn't need a DEIB agenda because it probably doesn't mean much. So I think, I don't know that we've stopped. I don't know that it's changed in a way that's kind of hindered us. Cost is a real thing, but I don't know that we are putting in programs. If we can't even get someone, in an advisory space in government to kind of have a say, then I guess it is questionable. Are we doing the right thing within organisations? But certainly where I've been, I can't say that it's taken a backseat. I think a lot of people are focusing on it even more now because we know even more about it and we know it's absolutely critical to business success. One of the things I will comment on though, and I'm happy to go back to that, is just, Ellie, you were talking about before that sort of total rewards piece, and I just want to pivot and, Hong, you can bring me back to where we're going, Hong, in a minute, but when we're looking at how we're retaining people at the moment, I had total rewards down as something I thought we should probably talk about, because the retention piece, when people are feeling unstable and insecure, always comes back to, certainly in conversations, total reward, right? So how are we providing, those sort of wellness outlets for people, remuneration that's actually something that's palatable by employees, or how are we rewarding for bringing people together and connecting? And I think there's a huge space to play in here, and I've actually seen an increase in those REM specialist roles, right? People who are going to really start to define how we continue to retain our talent and protect it, wrap arms around it with the budget that we have and how we do things differently. So I just thought that was an interesting point before. And around underrepresentation, isn't it funny that we've gone through this huge, life-changing event being COVID and everything else that goes with it? We've proven that any roles that can, work remotely or in a hybrid way could work with the right technology and the right communication strategy. And yet one of our biggest, one of the things I'm hearing the most of in terms of trends is bringing people back and making it mandated and going back to an old way of working. And everybody has some pretty big opinions on this one. But what I do think Ellie, that data that we see around underrepresentation, I have a feeling that there are a lot of women in leadership roles who have absolutely now been put in a position where we know that there are roles that are played at home, grossly generalised, of course, but we know that that's something we work towards in terms of inclusion. I wonder of how many of those underrepresented communities we see in terms of candidature we would turn off, right? People that have carers responsibilities or people that have, home responsibilities that we're kind of going to impact now by saying, well, you need to be in from 8:30 to 5:30. So it'll be interesting to see the data come through. And I don't know, Derek, Hung, if you guys are seeing that in terms of candidates that come through and the questions that they're asking, but that's been one of the biggest trends, I would say, probably the last 12 to 24 months. Like, you would get the flex question constantly. I don't doubt that.
We know that flexible working is a high demand sort of priority for candidates, almost every candidate, every demographic, every sector. But there has been a sense that the bosses are saying, let's get back to the office. That's certainly been very clear, UK, US. Has that been the case in Australia as well, in the sense that you can see that there's like lots of communication, and media would say something and then some politician would say something, and then there seems to be a drip feed of this return to office propaganda. Is that something that you felt as leaders in recruiting in TA? Like, have you felt that this is happening outside of your company, that there's this push towards getting people back? And if so, have you had that internal conversation? Has your boss turned around and said, "Hey, Lucy, what do you think of this?" What's the current situation, if we don't mind to say, internally? Has that been discussed as something that is something we should quote unquote be doing?
Well, Hung, my role actually sits in Brisbane at the moment before I'm back in Sydney. So I can't fault Gumtree because, I've been doing this now for almost 12 months and it's been an incredible ride. We are absolutely 100% committed to hybrid. And we haven't really shifted from that. So we always wanted to be back around each other. So I think I have a feeling, based on a newsword, sort of that return to work propaganda. I saw an article the other day that I think was headed up, and it was on LinkedIn. It was kind of like, oh, should bosses pay less for people that are choosing to work from home? Or it was some article. And I was like, oh, I'm not even going to read that, because actually people delivering and doing incredible things, regardless of where they work, actually is probably more of what we see than wanting to go, oh, well, should I cut someone's salary even more based on the current Australia climate, cost of living? Like, that to me is just absolutely senseless. So it's interesting, and it makes people feel scared, right? So I think, but certainly what I'm hearing, and I'm not in the recruiter market, but certainly what our TA lead tells me is that people want to know that there's flex, because it sets the scene and it sets the standard for how they're going to feel once they're here, and maybe how we think as an organisation. So where you are an organisation that can empower people and trust them to work in the best way, right? How is it that you're communicating that, and do your actions and your values actually kind of sing out for what you're saying you do? Because there's nothing worse than meeting with someone, they say it's one way and you get in and it's different. So I think we're probably hearing a little bit about the question that's being asked, but we're certainly sort of setting that from the start and saying, this is how we like to operate. We're better together. We'd love to see you a couple of days a week. How does that sit with you? So I think the way we're having the conversation, where we're privileged enough to be able to have it, I think that's where it's changing from my experience. But Ellie, I don't know how, and Derek, I don't know how you found that more recently, candidate market-wise.
I think lots of companies are saying that they want people in the office, or even telling candidates they have quite a firm stance. And I think what must be really frustrating for candidates is arriving to a company that have said they have a firm stance, and all of the candidates that were, or employees that were with them during COVID, every company I've seen that's done a return to office has not been able to get their company worth of employees back in on a very regular basis. I still think, even where policies stipulate more than the 1 to 2 days a week, people are not coming in that frequently. Certainly from what I'm hearing, Etsy did it a really smart way, and I can take no credit for it, because I worked for the Depop people team as their people leader, but we did borrow this from Etsy eventually, which was they had a system called How and Where We Work, and we took it at Depop and we called it My Mode. And there were 3 buckets of what you could fall into, and it really helped signal to people what the norms were and what you could pick. And so the 3 buckets were, you could be a flex mode worker, which you were by default. And it didn't even have an expectation around times per week. The expectation was simply that we'll see you in the office 4 times per month. And that will probably even out that you'll be in once per week. And it will probably be that you have a team day. But if it's not, and if you have to stay home one week because you're getting a delivery or you have some caregiving responsibilities and it makes your life easier to be home, no sweat. So everyone by default was a flex mode worker. And it meant that we really designed our weeks and our months and our schedule of activities around the gathering moments we created around our flex mode team. But we had these 2 other really important modes, one being office mode. So that was for like workplace teams, IT teams. And at that size of company, they're quite big teams. So you are actually needing to make them feel like there is an option that is designed around them. And really thinking about what their needs are. So that was, you'll be expected to be in probably 4 days a week. And look, we'll try and make a day where you can work from home and do some more kind of administrative activities or strategic thinking, depending on what your level is. And then there was remote mode. And what really this unlocked for us is when we were going live with any role, we could say to people, is this a flex mode role? Is it a remote mode role? Is it one where we could offer the particular mode to the right candidate? Remote mode meant you came to the office 4 times per year. And what that allowed us to do again was to arrange 4 really meaningful moments per year for people to intentionally come to the office and everyone gathered together. And so by doing that, we put language around the expectation for every person, but we also gave people choice and flexibility. And it meant that everyone knew where they stood. And it ended up being a really, really smart pay by Etsy, and something that also worked super well at Depop in terms of setting those expectations.
That's a really great framework, and it's great to see that that seems to be effective for you guys there, Ellie. Folks, that may be worth a replay, because if you're struggling with having that internal communication as to how to play it, your credibility is on the line. By the way, if you start saying things sort of one point a year and then there's an about shift, 6 months down the line, that's such a destructive thing to try and do. And I think a lot of us in the TA and the HR teams are often the carriers of that of that message. That's very sort of damaging to our credibility. So it's very important, I think, that we, if your company currently doesn't have a clear vision as to how you're going to handle this return to office type of pressure we're getting, it's quite important you put one of those together. Derek, quickly go to you on this RTO business. Are you getting the same sense that, yes, there's pressure to do it? And I think we've gone down a very interesting track to say that it's actually a very powerful way to attract candidates and retain talent if you're able to maintain a consistent philosophy regardless of the pressure that's coming through.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, and relevant topic. I don't think it's going to change. I think it's going to continuously evolve. At all leadership levels, we have to going to have to continuously think and rethink workplace flexibility, employee flexibility. I think that from our perspective, we certainly need to be practicing what we preach. So we have to make sure that we are providing as much flexibility as possible, but I guess within the constraints of what is possible for us to provide the best employee experience. So if we don't have the infrastructure or the cultural support frameworks to ensure that our employees can actually thrive in their role and be successful in their role, then we have to continuously look at how we can either provide that or whether or not we need to adapt the flexibility that we're able to provide. I think what we are seeing out in market, through, I'm probably a bit more cynical about it in terms of I do genuinely believe that organizations have used the return to work demand and the increase of days. It's very much gone from a lot of organizations, choose your days, choose how you work, to 1 day, 2 days. Now we're seeing probably on average of 3 days requirement in the office. But there was a point where it was almost loosely enforced, and there wasn't really an expectation around it. But I certainly think that has shifted probably in the last 6 months, and certainly in the middle part of the year when hiring, and unfortunately, obviously, restructuring is probably at its most prominent. And I think when I touched on a lot of those other ancillary industries hiring and doing the hiring, I guess over 2023, a lot of those organizations and industries, outside of tech, I think they're still struggling to grasp and come to terms with having a flexible workforce, and a remote-based workforce in a lot of their roles. I do understand a lot of them may be blue collar and manufacturing or the like in nature. So it just adds an additional complexity there. But I think some organizations and some leadership groups, I genuinely do believe they've used it as a way of sort of almost forcing people out to help potentially avoid the branding challenge of making redundancies or restructures. But one of the concerning trends, I think I am definitely starting to hear, is there's a lot of leadership focus now on the those parents that are trying to juggle home responsibilities, work responsibilities, and when they are looking at productivity output, and companies are looking at, I guess, the ways in which those teams are crafted and I guess the structures within, there seems to, I think, be a real trend in terms of a bias against either working mothers or working primary carers, where they're trying to do that juggle. And it's really surprising. It's really surprising to me that how shorter memories we have, considering where we were just a few years ago. But I just feel like it's a real capitalist mindset that's creeping back in. And I don't know whether that's because of the challenging interest rate and obviously cost environment we live in now, with expectations to be a lot more profitable than what we used to be.
Yeah, I think absolutely right. And before we kind of move on to that next point, it's worth discussing those issues, sort of just in a quick summary. Firstly, the remote has a massive D&I sort of dimension to it. And if you're kind of hearing that people need to go back to the office, quote unquote, that is a definite strike against diversity. I think we have to kind of accept that those two things go hand in hand. And you know, this strikes really deeply into your commitment to those values. So that's the first thing to say. And the second thing to say is also that there's a lot of disguised redundancies. You know, one way to try and shake the tree, so to speak, is to have a more harsh policy than perhaps you previously promised, in order for people to leave. We've seen some prominent examples of that actually on a global level. I remember Grindr, if you remember the dating app. They did a very harsh rule coming back in. They lost about 50% of their employees straight away. But then it seemed very much like that was part of the plan. You know, it was like, okay, that's what they wanted to do. So I don't think it's wrong to be cynical. I think cynicism can be a very bad place to step into, Derek, so don't spend too much time there. However, I think there's also realism because, you know, you can see from the company perspective that there might be reasons why you do this. But again, as you say, it's pretty much sort of a capitalist mindset to go down that route. Okay, let's switch forward to 2024, folks. Particularly what we think our priorities need to be, having now learned what we've learned from 2023. Is there, I mean, I guess we need to be thinking about it because we're nearly there, six weeks away. What are your personal priorities for your teams going into 2024? Let's go with you firstly, Lucy.
Over to me. It's a big question. Key focuses are going to be around, you know, doing things differently. And when I say that, thinking about what resonates for someone else might not resonate for me, and what works. I think we're moving to this new way of, well, we're coming together more in connecting. So what is it that people need to be able to do that? And how do we offer things that don't necessarily cost money? It could be coaching with someone you really admire in the business, right? It's free. It gives someone succession. It helps them re-engage, right through to what type of leave are we offering? Are we thinking about what works for people? You know, I mean, menopause leave, a prime example of something that's hot topic at the moment. We're going to need to address that. What are we doing for people that are wanting to start a family and want family leave and need to plan around that, need extra help? What are we doing around people that actually just want to be able to have a side hustle or build a business or interested in property, whatever that might be? What are the options that we're giving people? So when we say we're flexible, are we truly flexible, living those values underpinned, right, in our DNA at our core? Are we really saying, well, you know, I mean, at Gumtree Group, one of the values of ours is think like a customer. So when we're kind of programming, we're thinking about what is it that we're creating this year or next year, I should say. How are we going to do that in a way that really puts that customer first? And I think so, yeah, for us, big focus is going to be, let's drive purpose on purpose, right, with purpose. So let's figure that out. Let's make sure we're offering people something that is different and something that's bespoke for them, right? So like, outside of the everyday perks, how are we designing those experiences for people and how are we really connecting with them in a way that's actually meaningful, where they go, I love where I work. I can feel an emotional connection, like I am genuinely engaged. And I think sort of the third thing is, let's keep questioning, how do we be better leaders? How do we incorporate that commercial side of the business as well as with kindness and empathy? Because the world's a bit of a crazy place and everybody needs something different. So I know for us, holistic health is going to be one of those really big pieces that we focus on. And I think any data insights, guys, that we can get within that, right? Any AI, any data, I think the better. But really just putting people first and thinking about, you know, if we've got people that are truly fulfilled and engaged, we're probably going to have very happy customers. So that's going to be that 2024 key focus for us, I think, at this point. Who knows? Things might change next week, right? But that's where we're at the moment.
No, but I love it. I think the worst thing we can do is sit back and just hope for better markets or better whatever, right? I think there's still that sense that, you know, that optimism that we talked about at the beginning can be a negative if we end up just sitting in that type of mindset. No, what we have to do is start looking at this and make commitments. And I look the idea that you know, you start off think about your candidates pretty much as customers? And can you offer them a personalized experience interacting with your business and interacting with your brand? And that may be one way to compete into this strange market where we have risk aversion in the marketplace. Candidates might be looking, but they don't trust themselves. They don't trust the external market enough to make the leap. Okay, Derek, go to you. What are your 2024 commitments? How are you and your business going to handle the next 12 months?
Yeah, Hung, it's interesting. Obviously, we've got two ways we look at it. One is internally what we do for our organization, and then secondly, it's like we're looking externally at like what is happening and what are our customers asking for. I think certainly both internally and externally, the biggest thing for us at the moment and what we're hearing is just there's a huge demand for insights. Everyone wants insights to help ultimately make better data-driven decisions, and I think that is probably one of the big learnings coming out of COVID that has actually been adopted and maintained. And, as we see, certainly for ourselves, in thinking about our own resource management plan and our own flexibility around our workforce plan, taking data at the center of that is certainly our key priority. I think touching on Lucy's perspective as well, I think, we do believe that there's a huge burnout issue ultimately across our industry. We have it internally. I mean, myself personally, I've just come back from taking a couple of months out and stark realization that I burnt out from COVID, I would say. And speaking to a lot of my peers, out in the industry, I think that it's certainly becoming much more accepted and open for us to have dialogue and just acknowledge and call out that a lot of us as an industry are feeling burnt out. And so looking after our employees, but also looking after each other, is certainly probably the next key priority for us. I really think that, that's enough going into 2024, because keeping that adaptive responsiveness and that ability to be flexible is just paramount.
Yeah, and it's also something we need. It also supports the resiliency as well. If you are already massively overstressed as an industry, I think we are, to be honest, because we've lost a lot of talent out of the industry. We seem to we're forced to do more with less, right? It seems the workload hasn't reduced in any way, despite the slow pace of growth in a lot of sectors. It's not great for our long-term resiliency if we don't look after our own mental and physical health. Go to you with the same question, Ellie. What are your sort of plans for your team, you and your team in 2024?
So many great things have already been said, so I'll try and keep it quick. I think there are three things I'll touch on. So the first is there's already been some great discussion from the other panelists about well-being, but companies starting to treat well-being and productivity as the same conversation, not two different conversations, I think is really important. And so, like, we've seen everything that's happened in the world. We couldn't have predicted it all. We thought COVID was the big thing and it was over and now we can all go back to normal. What we can be certain of is that people, a whole range of things is happening, right? And we can't ever truly know how that's impacting the intersectional nature of the workplaces we have. So if we think that well-being is about the fluffy stuff, and then we're wondering, like, why is productivity struggling so much? Why is everyone so burnt out? We're having the wrong conversation as far as I'm concerned. So starting to bring those two things together so that you can really get to the heart of what the C-suite wants, right? Which is productivity. So if you can bring those two things into one conversation, I think that would be really powerful. Second thing is, I work for an AI company. I've been in the company for less than a month, by the way, so I haven't fully sorted out my roadmap yet. But if HR teams aren't thinking about AI, at some point you're going to end up far, far, far behind. And so really starting to think about your own tech stack. And that's tough when we are resource constrained in HR. I'm sure nobody's thinking about giving us massive budgets for 2024. But for me, working in an AI company, it gives me a platform to talk really openly about how my tech stack in my own org helps me to better serve my customers. And I hope other people in other companies are able to start really thinking about what's new on the market. How can we use what's available to us, but also learn from the tooling that other teams are using? I find in HR, we sometimes wait quite a long time to start using some really great tech that is available to other teams and other teams are adapting to and utilizing. And Hung, one of the first things I do in any new role, including this one, is resubscribe to your newsletter, which is such an easy way to find out, like you're talking about AI all the time. So if you're feeling like it's such a minefield, I truly can't recommend Hung's newsletter enough. And I mean that as like, I've been an avid follower of that for years. And it helps me to feel like I know what I'm talking about in a company where obviously there's a lot of knowledge of generative AI and how it's being used. The final thing I'll say is around pay fairness. So we talked a lot about DEI. And in Australia, we're starting to catch up with some of the legislation that's existed for many years in the UK around gender pay gap reporting. And so if you're not spending 2024 really thinking about the pay structures that you have and how they do or do not cater to the different communities that you have, one, I think employees are much wiser to pay transparency laws that are happening in the rest of the world. And so if you're a global company, you might already be doing it in other countries. But if you're an Australian-owned company with Australian employees, you might not be thinking about it yet. But just starting to anticipate some of the questions that are going to come from your employees and then the way in which it's going to publicly play out when there's more gender pay reporting here in Australia is really important for thinking about, again, that total comp piece and retaining your talent from lots of different communities.
Fantastic stuff. Excuse me. And we have Michael coming back to us. Mike, great to see you on the show. We're very disappointed that you actually left the screen. So great that you're back with us. Wonderful to get you back, sir.
I had to leave the experts to it. So I just wanted to jump in with a quick question around AI, because it is the thing that we're all talking about. And we're talking about data and AI. And we've just seen in the news recently a case where there was some data that was produced using AI against some of the big four consultancies that was turned out to be completely false. And it created an enormous furor. So we're all sitting here, we're all looking for more data. We're saying we want accurate data. How do we balance the need for data with the fact that AI is producing things that we can't accurately validate as being real data? And what do we do about that then? Because we're all resource constrained, we're all time constrained, and the easy thing to do is just chuck the question into whatever AI engine we're using and produce the reports from there. And there might not be a right answer, but I figured I would be remiss if I didn't sort of ask about the big brother is watching us, what's it really telling us question.
Great question. Why don't we go to it? Derek, your thoughts first?
Yeah, it's interesting, as a company that produces a lot of insights and talent intelligence out to market. Obviously, this year in particular, with the explosion of ChatGPT and all the related to the conversational AI, generative AI tools, we were very tempted to obviously, redeploy funding from the human researchers into, the technology. And we tested it out and we trialed it out, and we certainly have integrated some of it. But what we have done is we've maintained and ensured that we have that sort of quality control, of the humans still reviewing the outputs before we actually distribute it out. So it's helped us certainly in terms of maybe some heavy lifting from an efficiency perspective, but I think that we were very wary about, what we would be producing out to market and then what's that impact on our brand. And certainly at this stage, and that's a great example, Michael, it's just for us, giving us more evidence as to why we have to continue to have the layer of humans overseeing what we're actually producing from a content perspective.
Yeah. How about your thoughts, Lucy, on this?
You know what, Hung? I was going to say I'm going to throw to Ellie because she's got the lowdown on anything AI. And yeah, we're running low on time. So Ellie, over to you. I think you're going to share some good insights, more than me anyway.
I mean, I've been in the generative AI space for less than 4 weeks now, but it's moving so fast. You get to learn a lot in that time, and I've been using AI tools before then. So what I would actually agree with Derek entirely. It's exactly why AI is not replacing humans anytime soon. If we think we're at the point of like putting our feet up and pretending we're working all day, but AI is doing it, I really don't think we're there yet. What I think it does is it makes us freed up to do the things that only we can do, right? And so it will supercharge the stuff that is repeatable. It will help us fix problems quicker. I know at Depop in my team, it helped me stop being the go-to Excel person because I am a lover of data. And so I would use Sheets and like Google Data Studio to solve lots of my problems for me. And I had become very good at finding a solution for something I couldn't do. My team used me for that. And I said, why don't you try asking ChatGPT to work on that formula? If you'd say, because we don't have to give it any of our data, talk about the problem you're trying to solve, talk about the formula you've tried, and get it to like pair program with you, essentially. And it made my team so much more resourceful, not to just wait on me to help solve that problem, but it helped them to think of new applications for how they can use their data. And so I think with AI, yeah, you can't rely on it to do your job for you, but you can get it to help you solve a problem that you're trying to solve and think through the solution. And I think that that's really powerful for people teams.
Yeah, I think
Billy,
so.
I was just going to add to that and say, because at the end of it is when you implement something that is complementary, you get to actually spend more time with people, which is the job, right? That's where those magical moments happen. So I'm probably more optimistic, right, like you guys, in terms of AI and it kind of helping us level up more and elevate, right, lift the proposition. But spending more time with people is the best thing you can get out of it.
And on that note, folks, that is something that is an important point to underline. AI should provide us with more time. That's the entire theory of any technology innovation. It's meant to be an efficiency gain for us. The question is, how do we use that excess time? Are we going to sit there and simply do more with less, as in reduce our team size? Or are we actually going to use that time and apply it to the areas that we say we care about, like DE&I, like creating better candidate experience, like better job design, all of those super important things that were always on the top of the rhetorical list as the things that we were meant to be doing. Perhaps AI can help us actually get there. We have to make sure that they stay at the top of the priority list, and we're not just purely focusing on smaller teams doing more with less with the support of technology. We have to come to an end. Excuse me, folks. We have to come to an end of the conversation. So wonderful to have our guests on the show here. And thank you everyone for joining us also. Let's thank our guests, Derek McCartney, Lucy Wilson, and Ellie Miller. Mike, great to have you on the show as well. Maybe you can help me out with the finish because I've got a frog in my throat.
Indeed. Well, of course, because you would never be so gauche as to thank yourself. So thank you so much for coming along from halfway around the world. It's great to get your insights and perspectives. To the whole panel from the team at Strivon, we're really grateful that you took the time to share with our audience the things that you've learned, the thoughts that you've had, and whether people were here live or whether they watch the recording later, everyone's going to come away from this smarter than they were. To all of you who attended, thank you so much. And to anyone who is interested in learning more about Strivon, because I'm obviously a company man, please go to the website, check it out. If you're looking for a mentor, coaching, if you want to find a community that is there to help you grow, just like these great people, you can definitely get them there. Thank you so much, everybody, and good luck as you finish 2023 and get ready for 2024.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.